morning. The committee will come to order. I would like to welcome back before the committee the Inspector General of the Small Business Administration, the Honorable Peggy Gustafson. Over the past few weeks, the committee, along with its subcommittees, has held a series of hearings in response to a report by the Government Accountability Office, the GAO, regarding management deficiencies within the Small Business Administration. The GAO noted that many of the challenges identified in its report were first identified by the SBA's Office of the Inspector General. Today, we will hear Inspector General Gustafson's unique perspective on the management of the SBA, as well as her insight into ways in which the SBA may more effectively and more efficiently assist small businesses. I was troubled by the findings made in the GAO's report, and I think most of the members of this committee were as well. What was particularly disturbing was just how many of the challenges identified in the report had already been identified by the Inspector General and were known by the SBA. In fact, reports and audits compiled by the Inspector General revealed that some of the most serious management challenges affecting the SBA were first highlighted over a decade ago. As these issues have gone unresolved, SBA programs have remained vulnerable to waste, fraud, and abuse, which undermines the agency's mission to support America's small businesses. It's clear that the Inspector General plays a critical role in ensuring effective management of the SBA. By conducting audits to identify program mismanagement, by investigating fraud or other wrongdoing, or by recommending changes to increase the efficiency of SBA operations, she has provided independent and objective reviews of agency actions. And now, the SBA, under the watchful eye of this committee, must act. By clarifying the specific areas in which improvement is needed and highlighting possible paths forward for the agency, the insights offered by the Inspector General are invaluable as the committee continues to work with the SBA to develop meaningful solutions to its management and performance challenges. I'd like to thank you, Ms. Gustafson, for coming today, and we look forward to your testimony. And I'd now like to yield to the ranking member, Ms. Velasquez, for her opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome. Today, we're holding the last in a series of oversight hearings this committee has undertaken over the past 2 months. It is only fitting that we culminate by examining the work of the Office of Inspector General and seek their input on ways to improve the agency. The OIG is an independent office tasked with auditing, investigating, and making recommendations to SBA that help the agency fulfill its mission. The OIG plays a critical role protecting the taxpayers' investment in the SBA. In 2015, the OIG helped recover or save over $134 million. Every year, the OIG is tasked with informing this committee of SBA's top management challenges. This report not only helps with our oversight responsibilities, but also provides SBA with recommendations to address the challenges that are identified. Unfortunately, many of those issues are very long-standing problems, some going as far back as 1999. One area of serious concern is small business contracting. The IG again identifies several shortcomings in SBA oversight and data collection, and in turn, the reliability of the reporting of small business contracting goals. Furthermore, both the IG and GAO have recently reported weaknesses in SBA internal controls that ensure only eligible firms receive contracts set aside for the Women-Owned Small Business Federal Contracting Program. Congress has given SBA the tools to address many of these problems, yet they remain unimplemented, and that is unacceptable. I look forward to hearing from the IG on ways SBA can improve the reporting on small business data and compliance with the small business, minority, and women-owned contracting goals. Another outstanding issue is the lack of oversight in the SBA 7 lending program. Though the agency has made progress, the IG continues to find fraud, waste, and abuse, particularly when loan agents are involved. The IG has recommended SBA assign unique identifiers to loan agents as a way to root out bad actors. I hope to explore this option during today's hearing and determine how we can better protect the American taxpayers. Additionally, multiple IG audits have uncovered millions in improper payments made under the 7A loan program. Particularly troubling to me is the IG's finding that SBA is not adhering to its own practices and procedures when reviewing high-dollar early default loans. As the size of the agency's portfolio increases, SBA must be more diligent in overseeing the 7A approval and purchase processes to minimize risk, or we may need to re-examine the size of loans SBA can make. Finally, weaknesses in the administration of disaster loan program continue to drag on at the agency. I cannot stress enough that this committee, the GAO, and the IG have all identified issues with disaster loan processing and implored the agency to implored the agency to implement the alternative loan programs enacted almost nearly 10 years ago. I know Administrator Contreras-Sweet has prioritized improving the disaster loan program, and I am hopeful the increased scrutiny of the administrator's changes as a result of the IG adding this program to the list of management challenges will lead to its overall improvement. I'm confident that we can use the IG's expertise and insight to explore ways for SBA to improve the delivery of small business contracting, lending, and entrepreneurial development resources. I look forward to hearing the IG's recommendations and working with you, Ms. Gustafson, to improve the SBA. I want to thank you for your presence here today, and I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Gentlelady yields back, and I'll now take just a moment to go over our timing rules here, which with one panel member are pretty easy. We operate by the 5-minute rule, which we stick to, and we'd ask you to stay within that if at all possible. There's a lighting system. The green light will be on for 4 minutes. The yellow light will come on for a minute to let you know that got about a minute to go, and the red light will come on. If you need a little more time, since you're our sole witness, that's okay. And I would ask committee members, if they have opening statements prepared, to submit them for the record. And we're now pleased to welcome back to the committee Inspector General Peggy Gustafson, who has served as the SBA's Inspector General since 2009. And we very much appreciate you being with us, and you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Chabot, Ranking Member Velasquez, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today and for your continued support of the work of the Office of Inspector General. I'm extremely proud to represent the dedicated men and women of our office, and I'm very happy to come and talk to you about their work today. As you've noted, as an independent office, the Office of Inspector General conducts and supervises reviews and investigations relating to SBA programs and supporting operations. We seek to detect and prevent waste, fraud, and abuse and try to promote economy, efficiency, and effectiveness in the programs of the Small Business Administration. During the last fiscal year, 2015, we achieved nearly $134 million in recoveries and savings, which is more than a 6-fold return on investment to the American taxpayer. We issued 17 reports containing 80 recommendations for improving the SBA's operations and reducing fraud and unnecessary losses. In addition, our criminal investigators, their investigations resulted in 52 indictments or informations and 57 convictions. While SBA's programs are essential to strengthening America's economy, this agency does face a number of challenges in carrying out its mission, including fraudulent schemes affecting all SBA programs, losses from defaulted loans, procurement frauds that allow large firms to obtain small business awards, excessive improper payments, and some pretty significant information technology management concerns. In October of 2015, we released our latest report on the most serious management challenge and performance challenges facing the SBA. Based on the agency's efforts, SBA did demonstrate positive progress in resolving recommendations associated with 5 of the identified challenges. However, they remained at status quo on 4 of the challenges and demonstrated no progress on 1 recommendation in an area related to information technology. Now, clearly, these results, I would say, paint a mixed picture relative to SBA's commitment to addressing these challenges in earnest and their ability to overcome these challenges. As you've heard in your series of recent hearings held by the committee, they face many serious concerns, SBA does, but even beyond, of course, those designated as top management challenges. GAO did document some of these in September 15 report, And I was certainly pleased to note that GA cited the work products of this office as a basis for a lot of their findings in that report. It's nice to have one oversight give props to another. We appreciated that. So for your information, SBA currently has 144 open OIG recommendations pertaining to reviews conducted in recent years and not so recent years across SBA programs. I want to note that I do share the overarching concern expressed by GAO before this committee in January. It would be irresponsible for me to not be concerned about the fact that SBA has not resolved many of these longstanding management challenges, and that part of this reason may be due to a lack of sustained priority attention given to these challenges over time. Having said that, I think it also has to be acknowledged that SBA has shown that with a sustained, committed effort over time, they can achieve successful results in these challenges. For example, they moved to green in the very large challenge related to their LMAS IT system. So, and I think that really shows that these are challenges that, with the right effort, can really be conquered and met. The agency needs to strive for excellence in carrying out their programs. The agency leaders it's essential that they look to and address the root cause of these problems, evidenced by these recurring findings in these reports, and also pay attention to surveys such as the Federal Viewpoint Survey mentioned in the GA reports, where the SBA workforce does continue to express some dissatisfaction with the management. The challenge of long-term organizational transformation in areas of these, such as human capital and IT, they're hard challenges, but they're not insurmountable with sustained attention by competent managers. I think that sustained leadership certainly absolutely is necessary, and that the SBA needs to try to close some of the revolving door on some of these key positions. For example, the CIO, the position of CIO that I know has been a source of concern and discussion within the SBA. There really needs to be an effort to work on having a sustained leadership in positions like that. I'm positive that everybody in the room agrees that America's small businesses and the taxpayer, they deserve no less than an SBA performing at its highest levels at all times. And for all those reasons, I really want to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today, and I very much look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your time here, and now we'll ask some questions, and I'll recognize myself for 5 minutes for that purpose. And you're right, we do owe the small businesses all across the country the best that we can provide and the best that the SBA can provide, and you indicated their record is mixed. And mixed isn't good enough, so they do need to do better, and us asking questions here is part of that process. So my first question would actually be, that last week your office released a report in which you identified a number of weaknesses in the SBA's management information security. Specifically, you found that the SBA is not sufficiently tracking security incidences, nor is it properly reporting them to the United States Computer Emergency Readiness Team. Your office made a similar finding last year looking at the SBA's 2014 fiscal year. Could you expound upon that and address that issue and what you found?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. The report that we're talking about, of course, is the annual FISMA, Federal Information Security, FISMA report. I've lost it. And you're right, one of the most concerning things about that report is, in addition to 5 new recommendations in our new report, 2 of which the SBA was able to close in the course of our audit work, there were 31 recommendations that had been carried over from previous years, which is just an exceptionally large number of IT, we're talking about IT vulnerabilities, IT system issues. The ones that you are talking about, there were definite concerns about, again, instances not being reported timely, happening again. I think that FISMA is an excellent, and information security is an excellent area where, again, it's clear that SBA, like every agency, has to always evidence a strong commitment to never, ever taking their eye off the ball on the state of information security and the state of their IT security. And you will note that in their report, some of the issues that they talked about as far as the incidents not being centrally reported, not being reported in time, they even mentioned the idea of there's been a lot of turnover in the IT area. There are things that, they're happening where they almost dropped the ball. That's, of course, unacceptable. And so I think that FISMA, again, which was looking at how they did in fiscal year 15, is a concerning report. I think it goes to show a perfect area where the agency needs to show leadership from the very top, saying this is not going to be acceptable. We are going to dedicate whatever resources it requires and address these issues. I will say that, I know that the Deputy Administrator, Mr. Kramer, has taken this on as something that is important to him. In the meantime, in the middle of FSMA, there's also that cyber sprint exercise where actually SBA did better. That was an exercise that all of the federal government went through after the OPM breach and things like that.
Well, if I could just maybe, now I've got limited time.
Sure, I'm
about
sorry.
2 minutes ago, that's okay. And I think that the point is, and the important thing is, they have a lot of sensitive information
Right.
from a lot of small businesses all across the country.
Right.
And bad actors are trying to get access to this information for all kinds of nefarious purposes. We know that the Russians and the North Koreans and the Iranians and others want access to this, so the government has to do a better job. And government's been hacked time and time again, so they need to do it. But I assume you agree with everything.
I agree. I was hacked twice in the OPM audit. Do you know what I mean? I mean, in the OPM breach. So I think we all feel that. And you're right. There's a lot of sensitive information related to businesses and individuals.
Thank you. Let me follow up also on that. Your reports have identified weaknesses in the SBA's incident reporting, yet in their most recent budget justification, the SBA claims to have had a 100% success rate in timely reporting incidences during that time. Is there a way to explain how the SBA is making this claim? If the SBA is going to claim success in the face of failure, how can we be sure that they will actually address and resolve their management challenges?
Well, it would be hard for me to, and obviously I can't answer that question on behalf of the agency. I would note that a couple of things. One is we are looking at a very specific a time period when we are looking at FSMA, and where we did note that there were incidents not being reported. And I would further note that the agency agreed with our findings in FSMA and actually had no quarrel with anything. So to the extent that there may be a disconnect on why one and not the other, I have to respectfully request that I think you may need to ask them, because all I know is that they agreed with us on FSMA.
Oh, we will.
Yes.
So thank you. My time's about to expire, so rather than trample on somebody else's time, I'm going to yield back, and I will now recognize the ranking member, Ms. Velasquez, for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Your office has repeatedly recommended that SBA should implement the Women-Owned Small Business Certification Program in tandem with the sole source authority granted in the 2015 NDAA. However, the agency moved forward with only the sole source provision. Can you discuss the risk that this poses to the integrity of the program?
Yes, Ranking Member Velasquez, thank you. I would point out two things that did cause us grave concern about that. One was, quite simply, the sole source authority was provided for that program in the very same legislative vehicle that directed SBA to institute a certification program for women-owned small businesses. So on a very basic level, we believed that they should be done at the same time, because Congress seemed to be telling SBA, we think we should change this on the program, but also do this. And so that was of a concern to us, especially given our work early on in the women-owned the WASB program, where there was self-certification being happened, and very early on when we took a sample, and when we looked to see what documents were behind the self-certification of some of these businesses that were supposed to be uploaded in that website to show why these businesses are supposed to be in the program, they simply weren't there. Okay. And so that seems to evidence a weakness in a self-certification program that was of concern to Congress. And yet here you are doing sole source, which is a much faster way of getting contracts out. You know, there's more money flowing out the door, and yet the safeguard that Congress has asked for hasn't happened yet. It's a source of great concern for us, and I appreciate Congress's continued attention to that.
Thank you. So my understanding is that SBA recently asked for comments on an advance notice of public rulemaking for what a certification could look like for the women's program. Has your office made any recommendation as to what the agency should do to prevent fraud and abuse when implementing a certification program?
I have the same understanding as you that this has been set out and sought comment. I know that we have done prior work in some of these self-certification programs and these certification programs that I think should always be a lesson for SBA when a new program such as WASB comes in. So I think that there are lessons to be learned from the Hub Zone program, for example, that talked about those certifications. And those are out there and, of course, are known to SBA because those are recommended directly to SBA. Whether we've made formal comments on the WASB, I don't believe so. I don't think that we have, but certainly we're there to help. We're there to give opinions. If they have further questions, I'd be happy to meet with them, and we certainly.
I'm afraid that they
Sure.
will use an excuse of
Yeah.
saying that they're waiting for you to provide the comments that they requested.
We're always happy to give them any comments that they ever want, Ranking Member Velasquez.
Thank you.
So.
For years, OIG investigations have revealed a pattern of fraud by loan packagers in the 7A loan program. Your office has recommended the implementation of a registration system, including the issuance of a unique identifying number for each agent. However, the SBA has made only limited progress in implementing this recommendation. Can you explain how the implementation of a loan agent registration system will reduce fraud in the 7A program?
Yes, thank you very much for your question. Loan agents are, outside parties that help package the documents that are used for getting a loan through. And what our investigators have found and have brought forward, and it's been a management challenge for a very long time, is if there's a loan agent out there who is falsifying documents and knowingly committing fraud, they're not doing it one time. That's what they do. And what has been a source of frustration for us for years is at first there was absolutely no way to know, here I have loan agent Jones and I know he is a fraud. Can you tell me what other loans has he worked on? And so we have been for years saying you have got to find a way to have a system where we can look up loan agent Jones and see what other loans there are. Not only to detect patterns, but absolutely to detect the amounts of fraud.
So what is the reason for SBA not to implement this recommendation?
I apologize for interrupting. There have been several reasons. At one point, and they have evolved as they have tried to make progress, to be fair, on the challenge. There were technology challenges. They wanted to do some updating of the databases. They did not want to and believe that they cannot use social security numbers, which is fine, which is why we are suggesting you don't need a social, make up a number, just have a certain one. So I think that they are getting closer. I think that they have now acknowledged that they need to have a searchable database that can't be, it can't just be that it's, if I'm Peggy Gustafson for one, but Peggy Elizabeth Gustafson for another, it won't get a match and stuff like that. I'm sorry.
You can complete your thought.
No, I think that I'm pleased that they're working with us finally on this because for a while there was no progress, but absolutely it's time to have a central system. And the lenders agree. I really don't think there's any question about that.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Gentlelady's time has expired. The gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Kelly, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Inspector General, for being here. Your testimony is not the first time we've heard of the problems of large businesses receiving contracts that were supposed to be reserved for small businesses. And as you know, this committee has taken steps to address this concern. We have increased penalties, including liquidated damages, imposed on companies for perpetrating fraud. We required companies to recertify their status as small upon a merger or novation of a contract. We have met with the GSA to require the new version of the government's procurement data system accurately classifies small and large businesses. Just this past January, we marked up legislation requiring the SBA to report separately on companies who have outgrown their size status. The committee has given the SBA tools to ensure that large businesses are not receiving small business contracts. Do you have any explanation why the SBA is not using the tools provided to them by Congress?
I don't know, Representative Kelly, that it's a question of not using the tools. I think it's more a question of that this is just a very big issue involving a lot of money, and there are so many kind of different aspects to this issue that there's not one good fix. Now, some of the things you mentioned, I think, should be tremendously helpful. The idea of recertification in the instance of a merger or novation should really change some of this things because when a small company is bought by a big company, for it now to have to recertify is a big deal. So I think that those are all very positive steps. I think that You know, we're talking about, 23% of federal contracting. We're talking about billions and billions and billions of dollars where there's money, there's going to be fraud. I think that, I don't know that that SBA is not using them. I think that we are, quite frankly, at a moment in time when time is going to tell very soon whether this is having an impact. These are things that this committee has advocated for and given it, in the relatively recent past. These are changes. It's hard to change IT systems and things like that. But I think that they're going to be crucial to kind of addressing those issues. So I think that that's, to be fair, a better way of putting it. And some of them should be very impactful and should help on this.
And going back to your earlier opening statement, one of the things that is important is for leadership to prioritize and to set goals and to have suspenses and deadlines. In your answer, I'm going to ask you another question, but I also want you to comment. Do you think that the leadership in SBA is properly prioritizing and properly setting standards and focusing on the right thing? Because in my experience as both a district attorney and as a commander in the military, our followers focus on those things which we check up on or those things which we prioritize. If we're looking at them, they fix them. If we're not and we just give it lip service, they do not. Do you think that they're setting the correct priorities?
I think that you are exactly right, that change is only going to happen when they are setting the correct priorities. I think, as I noted in my statement, when they do that, change happens. And I think that's why LMAS happened. I think that on some of these management challenges, what they've done in the recent past is, as they've gone to program officials and say, you own this challenge. And so if we don't make progress on this challenge, I'm going to want to know why. And you're absolutely right. Without that, change probably doesn't happen. Now, whether in the big picture where their priorities are is exactly right, I think is a bigger question. I think that sometimes SBA, and I have talked about this before, suffers from the fact that at its heart it is an advocacy organization. I think it often feels pressure to get the loans out the door, get the numbers up for 8A. And while those are lofty and important goals, they always need to be mindful that the right people and businesses have to be getting those goals. So it's an art, really, on applying the right type of pressure.
Right.
Yeah.
And when you referred companies for suspension or debarment, or to the Department of Justice for prosecution using the liquidated damages provision, what has been the response from the SBA and the Department of Justice?
I think that SBA has been incredibly receptive to our suspension and debarment referrals, up to and including taking a lot of credit for it, which is fair because in the end they do the suspensions and debarments, so I'm happy to share the credit and things like that. And we do find a receptive audience for them because we work very hard to give them a package that allows for a suspension or debarment. The same thing with the Department of Justice. In my experience in the past 6 years, I have found, I think, a stronger appetite, certainly, especially in the procurement area, for assistant U.S. attorneys to take these cases. I think there's been progress made in defining damages, which makes them more attractive to a prosecutor. We certainly do our best to give them the case all pretty and wrapped up and ready to go. And I think the will is there on both parts.
The gentleman's time has expired. Thank you, gentlemen. The gentlelady from New York, Ms. Clark, is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank our ranking member. And I would also like to thank our distinguished witness, the Honorable Peggy Gustafson. Am I getting it there?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, for your testimony today. Ms. Gustafson, is it an imperative that the Small Business Administration accurately report the contracts awarded to small businesses? I'm raising this because I think it is impossible to know where to focus our efforts in meeting small business contracting goals when we are possibly dealing with inaccurate procurement data. Can you speak about how the SBA plans to mitigate this issue of inaccuracy in goaling data?
I think that, Representative Clark, you're alluding to an incredibly crucial point, which is it makes no sense to tout a goal and to tout having reached the goal if, in the end, you can't really have confidence in the numbers behind that goal. And I do think that there has been a body of work by my office and by GAO that has, called into question whether there can be complete confidence in those goaling numbers. I think it's a complicated issue because when you start getting into goals and the reporting, Often the reporting begins with the procuring agency doing the right coding and putting it into the system, and SBA ends up doing kind of a capping of, we're adding those up. And so I would acknowledge that that is a challenge, but I do think that it's important that that a hard look is that SBA take a hard look and really be not skeptical, but question the numbers just so that they can reach a confidence level that really it is representing small businesses, that when you talk about the billions of dollars and say 25%, that you can look at the American public and say, I am telling you that 25% of that money is going to small businesses who is performing that work. I do think that for various reasons, both in inadequacy of data systems, data errors, which seem to always be one way and not the other, which is it's coded small when it should have been coded large. You don't see the opposite happening. And I think with some of the very complex rules related to what Representative Kelly referred to, which is companies that graduate out of the program, that get big, that get bought, that's a whole lot of details that gets lost when it's just about the number. So I think what's crucial is that that number really be delved into by those of us, myself included, GAO, committees such as yours, and really ask, tell us what you think that number means, SBA, and explain to us why Northrop Grumman might be on there. Let's talk about that. I think it's important to shine a light, but the work after that gets very complex, and without holding feet to the fire of both the SBA and the procuring agencies, there's too big an incentive to really meet those numbers. There's a huge incentive to meet those numbers. And that is often at the cost of making sure that you can tell the taxpayers that those numbers are right.
Very well. I hope that you'll continue to encourage them to sort of drill down,
Absolutely.
as we will as well. As you're aware, a collaboration between the SBA and other federal agencies is so critical to the mission that small businesses can fairly compete for federal contracts. How can the SBA improve its collaboration with other federal agencies so that small businesses are treated fairly in contracting practice? And which steps are the SBA already taking to do so?
I think that when you look at our management challenges, especially when you look at them kind of historically, and there's always been a challenge related to small business and up to the contracting goals and things like that, one of the things that I think SBA is to be commended with is that we really tried to push them to say, look, and I think this is a government-wide issue, you can't say your responsibility ends at the door to the procuring agency, because these are difficult programs that you know better than anybody else. And, the problem becomes too diffuse if you're going to say, well, that's a DOD contract, or that's an Air Force contract, or an EPA contract. And I think that they have taken some steps in that as far as training, as far as going to the colleges, and I don't mean the colleges, but the acquisition courses that teach acquisition, because it's a very confusing area, and say, hey, let's have a small business section and let's talk about that. I think that is progress on their part, and I think they need to continue to do that and really continue to own the responsibility for ensuring the integrity of those programs. Because if SBA doesn't own them, nobody's going to. Yeah.
I thank you for your answers this morning, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from New York, Mr. Hanna, who is the chairman of the Subcommittee on Contracting and Workforce, is recognized for 5 minutes.
A couple of quick things. You're doing a great job, incidentally. It's wonderful to hear you speak. The 22 cases, $333 million. Can you describe to me what that looks like in the real world, how that can even happen? And are there a lack of, why should someone have to be prosecuted criminally to eliminate them from a loan organization that's designed to help people? There's a national group. Frankly, we'd like to have the cap limited, or the cap raised from the 21 billion, I think it is today, even higher. It's hard to justify, and it's going to be more difficult with this kind of fraud, but should it be necessary to have somebody prosecuted criminally in order to get them debarred?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I mean, the easiest way to debar somebody is to wait for a conviction, and then it's easy because you can debar them with no question. But the law has always provided for what you would call, and you're well aware, a fact-based debarment or suspension. And, you know, I don't think it necessarily takes a criminal prosecution, especially because in these programs, it's a very sophisticated type of person who knows how to take advantage and defraud these programs because they're confusing. And you need to know how to take advantage of the system. All it really takes is I don't think it takes somebody, pardon me, behind bars, but I think you need to hit them in their pocketbook, you know, and I think debarment is often a very easy way to do that.
But the next question is, if it's that easy,
Right.
why is it that you need to be the person to identify this, that you need the person to be the person, the organization, to actually see that this is done?
Right.
I mean, if I were running the SBA and I had credible suspicions, you, go ahead, you know what I'm
Oh,
doing.
no. I think, you know, the quick answer to your question is it doesn't have to be me. I mean, they have the enforcement authority and ability and that.
Okay, so the question is there a cultural problem?
I do think, first off, I think government-wide, just in my experience as an IG and speaking to other IGs, I think government-wide there had been a cultural problem of especially on the suspension and debarment front, of trying to touch that if you did not have a conviction. I think the federal government, and there was a task force that was created, I think they are doing better government-wide on doing that, led by some much more aggressive agencies. EPA was actually pretty aggressive about S&D, as was the Air Force. They had some pretty strong suspension and debarment officials who were out there really doing that type of work, which is always easier to follow somebody who does it first, because then you know how to do it. And, you know, I think SBA has that capability. I will say that, as I previously mentioned, but I absolutely think it's true, I think it's sometimes hard for SBA to put their enforcement hat on. I really do. And I think it's because I think they somehow feel like it's at odds with their advocacy element, which I personally don't understand, but I'm not an agency official in that way. Just because anytime somebody is getting, be it a loan or a contract that aren't supposed to, some legitimate small business is getting hurt. And I firmly believe that the honest participants in these programs, be it the small businesses getting the contracts or the lenders, they would be happy to see these bad actors get out of there. So I do think that it's unfortunate that a lot of times the enforcement angle has been not given the same priority as the advocacy angle. Anecdotally, I think they're better about it. And I think one of the reasons is, I wish it was because of me, maybe it is, but I also think it's because of you. I think it's because of Congress, because nothing is more impactful, quite frankly, than hauling an agency official up
Well,
here.
you seem pretty scary to me. If you
Do I?
Yeah. So is there something that you might advise this committee to do to kind of open that opportunity for them, or reinforce that they shouldn't have to go through this to get to that point?
I think that the best thing that Congress can possibly do is to never let the agency forget that you are there. And I think that, and I don't think they forget that you're there, but I think that, as somebody noted before, unless they think you're anybody, it's a rational actor kind of thing. Unless they think that unless they're worried that that's what you're paying attention to, they're going to worry about the other stuff. So in addition to this series of hearings, which I think really has been impactful, at least certainly right now in the short term, there are other things that you can do that would not be as onerous for you all as hearings. You don't have to call me up all the time or anything like that. But I think just kind of holding their feet to the fire, I think it just pays off immense dividends, be it a letter or briefings or things like that in addition to this. They won't forget that.
Thank you,
Thank
Chairman. I
you.
yield
Gentleman
back.
from New York's time has expired. Another member from New York, Ms. Meng, who is the ranking member of the Agriculture, Energy, and Trade Subcommittee. I think 80 or 90% of the people that have asked questions, other than the chairman himself, are from New York here
think so,
today.
too.
Looks like the next president of the United States may well be from New York, and you guys are taking over the world again. So
Can we quote you on that?
don't you dare. The gentleman is recognized 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to our ranking member. Thank you to our witness for being here today and all the great work that you're doing. In your testimony, you identify weak oversight and lack of regulatory clarity as among the reasons that under the 8A mentor protege program, Larger companies can end up benefiting more from the program than minority-owned small businesses, which is contrary to the aims of the program and the SBA Act. What resources does the SBA need to strengthen oversight of this program, and can existing loopholes in the regulation be closed? Also want to find out, is anything more can be done through outreach and education to enable some of these small businesses to better protect themselves?
I think that I can't address the resource issue because I simply, I think that that's really more appropriate for the agency. I don't know if they feel like they have enough resources or they don't on that. Our mentor-protege audit is at least a couple years old now, but it did evidence a source of concern, especially in the joint venture area, because a mentor-protege joint venture will count for small business credit, will count towards the small business goal. So it's really crucial that the requirements of that program and the limits and things like that be met. I think you're right, there is always an education component because, again, it's not an excuse, but, those regs are no fun to read, and they're complicated. I think that similar to what I noted before, I think SBA needs to continue their education component because they really are the best ones to educate the procuring agencies and things like that on what the issues are. So, I think it is a tremendous tool if used correctly. If mentor-protege joint ventures are not used correctly, they become kind of almost a pass-through. I mean, where not only are there credit being given for things being done by small businesses, or by large businesses, but I think even just as tragically, the small businesses aren't getting the development experience that the whole mentor-protege program is meant to do, which is to say, you have this mentor and we're going to show you how to do it. And when that program is not running the way it should, they're not developing the way that, Congress has anticipated that they would be developed. So, so that's kind of the attention that I think needs to remain, and I don't really have an update in all candor on mentor-protege since then, but I'm hopeful that the agency has followed through on some of that. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Sure. And then on the same program, in 2011, the SBA revised its regulations and for this program and established additional standards to address the definition of economic disadvantage. In your report, you indicate concern that the additional standards are not justified or objective. Can you explain your concerns as well as your recommendation for improving the standards?
So the definition of economic disadvantage has been if you're aware of our color coding that we use for management challenges currently, which is red, orange, yellow, green, like a stop line sign, but with orange in there. It's been at red because we believe there's no progress, and it is quite frankly a place where the agency has just completely disagrees with us. We firmly believe, and we think it's crucial, that there be an economic analysis done to try to figure out what economic disadvantage means in terms of numbers. I mean, we don't think that the agency has performed or contracted out to get that robust economic advantage. I think it's crucial because if you are not defining economic disadvantage based on a competent and strictly done economic analysis, then how can you be sure that only the right people are getting into the program? And if you're letting people in who aren't economically disadvantaged, again, not only are the wrong people getting contracts, but quite frankly, they're at an advantage because they're probably more wealthy, they may be more sophisticated, have more assets. And so it really puts the truly economically disadvantaged, behind the eight ball to even benefit from the program. So I've been here now for 2 administrators. They don't agree with me on this, and they don't agree, and before me and before the first administrator, they don't agree with us on this. But I think it's something that really needs to be. I think it's an important enough issue that we've kept it at red. It's in the management challenges, and we think it's crucial to really be, again, these programs aren't worthwhile if you're not benefiting the right people because they're expensive programs. Very often the federal government pays a premium on some of these contracts, if you believe that full and fair and open competition, would be maybe cheaper for the government. And so you need to be benefiting the right people. And without starting with the right definitions, I don't think you're going to do that.
The gentlelady's time has expired. Thank you very much. The gentleman from Nevada, Mr. Hardy, who is the chairman of the Subcommittee on Investigations, Oversight, and Regulations, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
You know, as a small business guy myself, hearing some of the things that have happened with the SBA, I know they're trying to do a good job, but I continue to hear these issues over and over again, and it gives me a lot of angst as a small business person myself. I truly believe overall the SBA is trying to do a good job. I'm going to kind of ask you a question that has to do with your office. I believe you're the head of that office, are you not?
Yes.
When you put people into place, do they know their responsibility?
I believe so.
Do you assure that they have that they're fulfilling their responsibility?
Well, all of my employees are career government employees, who have to be, who have to fit the qualifications that we have for the positions, and then are managed. I've certainly made it a priority to make sure that to make sure that we're managing the employees to the, so that they're doing the right thing. So we provide the training that they need. Our auditors have to go through, continuing CPE, which is like CLE for lawyers and things like that. So,
thank you.
yeah.
And I think you know where I'm headed with this.
Yeah.
And so you've issued dozens of recommendations. And with these recommendations, do you feel like that they're being implemented in the expeditious manner that they should be? Or does it seem like it's taking too long? I've only been here a little over a year now, and I know this has been going on before I got here. So
Right.
is this happening in a manner that you perceive should be happening if you were managing this department?
Representative, clearly, no. In my opening statement, I referred to 144 open recommendations, and some of those date back to at least 2011. So that I think that, there are some that, so we're talking about some 5 years old, 4 years old, 3 years old, and that is a source of frustration. And it can be frustrating at times as the IG because, we can't make them do anything, so we report the recommendations and we keep them there. I will tell you that as IG even, I have emphasized to my staff that it's also on us. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like we've said a couple times, but I think it's crucial. They have to, it has to be a priority and it kind of has to be mentioned. And I think that, and certainly my head of audits has made it a priority as well to let our auditors know as well, hey, where are those recommendations? Where do they stand? There's no point in making a recommendation if nobody.
I think that's kind of my point
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
if we make recommendations and people don't follow them,
Right.
something has to change. This culture has to change. You brought it up yourself. You believe it is a culture.
Right.
And I believe it's a culture. I think it's what's happening in federal government in a lot of cases.
Right.
That just, I don't know what caused it, but we need to fix it. And I don't know how to get to that point. I guess that's what we're asking. With improper payments, do we really need to tell the SBA that they need to accurately report these on these? I mean, do we really need to do that?
Well, and I think that that's probably, and I think, you could extrapolate that to the whole government. I mean, I think the Improper Payments Act is, the emphasis on the Improper Payments Act has been much higher in the last several years after some improvements to the act and stuff like that. And I think it would be fair to ask, does it really take an act of Congress to make the agencies, care about improper payments? And the answer sometimes is yes. Because while they're running, sometimes when they're running their programs and getting their stuff done, it's hard. The stuff in the mirror, the stuff in the rearview mirror sometimes gets left behind. I do think that the federal government as a whole has made progress because of the Improper Payments Act and because of the attention paid to it, and SBA to a certain extent too. But it's been, they started with no processes on some of this, and so we're at a stage now after 4 years or so of these improper payments reports of where on some of these programs, okay, now they have the processes, and now we as the IG are going to wait and see if what they've instituted now that they've been told to do it are working. I can't defend the government's, the inaction for that, but I'm grateful for acts like that because I do think some progress has been made.
Well, and I appreciate what your office is doing,
Yeah.
but you really need to help us because, I truly believe the SBA is one of those economic drivers for this nation, and this nation is hurting economically. The small businesses are our economic driver overall, We need to get this thing functioning in a proper manner.
Right.
We need your help to make sure we continue to push, and we need to continue to do our job, but it's becoming very frustrating that this engine's not getting moving, so thank you.
Thank you.
The gentleman's time's expired. The gentleman from Kansas, Mr. Hulskamp, who's chairman of the Economic Growth, Tax, and Capital Access Committee, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the top of this hearing and looking for some accountability, and I appreciate your work on that. I want to follow up on the issue of improper payments. I think in multiple reports you've found, your office found that SBA is currently understating its improper payment rate. Can you describe that more fully for the committee, or at least summarize what's in your report and whether we've seen any steps at the SBA to fix this problem?
Again, absolutely. And as I just noted, it's been a process over the last several years, starting with the first time that the agencies were required to report improper payments. That year, we actually went and did our own analysis, and you may recall, and again, it may have been it certainly is in my tenure, I think it's 2011, we vastly disagreed on where those numbers were. I mean, it was inconceivable how far apart the agency was from the IG on that. And you know, we very quickly got into the weeds on some of this. Was it a sampling error, things like that, and projection and stuff like that. So, the process as we've gone forward and as the management challenges have noted is that we've really tried to hold their feet to the fire to institute the type of quality assurance reviews and the more stringent look at high-dollar early default loans, which are often an indicator that there may be something wrong with the origination of those loans. And that really did require SBA to kind of start some processes that weren't there and dedicate some resources that really hadn't been dedicated. So I think when you look at the management challenges report, to be fair to SBA, we have seen progress. There has been absolute upward movement in a positive way on instituting some of those processes and getting those in place. As I noted before, and when you look at our report of last October, which was our most recent management challenges report, the next steps will for us to be shown that the processes are now working and they're being used the way they're supposed to be used, and that they're working. The numbers that SBA has reported and the loan programs have been the largest numbers, and especially the disaster loan program, which started at a very, very high number. They have gone down extraordinarily in the last seveul years. Now, I will tell you that.
But at the beginning, if I might interrupt
Yes.
here, at the beginning, though, they were denying those high rates, so I didn't follow.
They were, and I'm sorry to. On one of them, they were indicating that they didn't think there was an improper payment rate, and I forget if it was 7A or if it was disaster. It was one of them where they said we don't think there are any improper payments. That is not the case anymore. They have started reporting rates, and our most recent improper payments reviews, which come out in the spring, our latest one will come out within the next couple months. It's either April or May. Have shown that they have followed the act and instituted the processes that are in there. Again,
But at the beginning, when
Right.
you came in, I mean, you were using SBA data, or did you go back
Oh, no,
and pull more information separately?
we were doing SBA data and trying to use the same sample, and so it got to questions of, you know, and of course, because we're talking about projections, I know that in some of the early work, it was just a matter of disagreeing over a couple of loans that caused them to have an incredibly low rate, and then to cause us to have what we felt was a more reasonable, and not excessively high, but a higher rate. And that was several years ago under Administrator Mills' tenure. I was pleased because the end result of that, and of course that always takes a while, and that's after the numbers have been reported and stuff, you know, and everybody's kind of moved on because the rates are there. They ended up agreeing with us and adjusting, and I remember getting into a fight with them over, are you going to go back and change the report, and we'll put it in a little footnote, and you know what I mean? And so, you know, but whenever they agree with us, however begrudgingly, I think that's good.
Do you think that's at the administrator level, or what about kind of the upper mid-level management, the folks that likely a year from now will still be there,
Right.
even though new administrator? I mean, have they somehow agreed with your all's assessment and the actual data mining that it takes to generate this type of rate and understanding of it?
We do believe that, and that's where the work is done, of course, is at the centers and at that program level. And they do, if they hadn't come around, there wouldn't have been movement on the challenges. So we think that they're there. The latest rate in disaster is down to under 10%. What's interesting about that is it started at about 28%. What's interesting at that causes them to be in compliance with IPURA, which is the act, which is good. But last year it was at 12%. That's a big jump or decline or whatever you do when you go from 12 to 8%.
What's the penalty for non-compliance?
You have to start instituting processes and devoting resources. There are financial penalties after a certain extent in that you can only.
No, for SBA if they don't. reach
That's
the
that's what it
compliance.
is. I mean, the act begins to require you to, kind of takes away your ability to spend money in certain ways because you have to devote certain amounts of money to those processes and things like that. So it was good that they went to 8.5%. It was a pretty crucial number, but.
Well, thank you. And
Yeah.
Chairman, I'm out of time. I yield back. Thank you.
Gentleman's time's expired. Thank you. I'd now like to yield up to 5 minutes to the gentle lady who has a few more questions.
I just have one more question,
Okay.
and this is an area that I've been deeply engaged since 2005 when Superstorm Katrina, Hurricane Katrina struck. And we saw the poor response from SBA, particularly in terms of the disaster lending program and the processing times. And so as a result of that, we passed legislation in this committee that provided tools for SBA to be ready for the next disaster. And we saw what happened during Sandy. Processing times took over 40 days, and the decline rate was extremely high, to the point where I introduced legislation that the president signed into law, reopening for the first time in its history the disaster loan program. And the fact that tens of millions of dollars has been already dispersed show that the need is still there. So my question to you is that since then, SBA has improved its response during recent disaster with loan processing time of less than 13 days. However, these events have not been of the magnitude of Superstorm Sandy or Hurricane Katrina, both of which resulted in significant delays. What level of confidence do you have that SBA will be able to respond as quickly as it has to another large catastrophe?
I think the best way to describe my confidence level is probably mixed. I think that the pressure that was put on and the attention that was paid to the inadequate response times and processing times in Sandy surely got the attention of the agency. And I know that you've paid a great deal of attention. I'm sure you've met with Mr. Rivera on that. You did that report that I thought was extraordinarily helpful that about the processing times and things like that. And I do think that in a way, again, when the agency knows that, this is something that they have to be laser focused on, they will be laser focused on it. And I think that certainly that is going to be a #1 priority for wherever the next big disaster, a Sandy or a Katrina or something like that, that's going to be a huge priority. But the challenge is going to be, and I know that you're keenly aware of this, is one of the things that affected the processing times in Sandy was the kind of new programs that they were trying to institute. I mean, in an ironic twist, the things that they were instituting that were supposed to expedite some of the processes, both on EIDL and in some of the smaller home loans. Because there's a learning curve there, because of whatever reason, that didn't help. It showed, and we did a report that showed that didn't really help. So that remains a concern for me. If there's going to be this kind of learning curve in the initial response to the disaster, especially in the context of the programs that I know that you have talked about and that we've talked about in our management challenges that have yet to be instituted, the third-party lender programs and the things like that that Congress had told SBA to use, I believe, in 2008 or something, I think. So my fear is, I guess, if this time they're really going to do that, that's going to be good, except for, is that going to, again, cause a learning curve or a lag in the beginning, and we find ourselves exactly where it is? I think, I hate to quote yourself back to you, but I think this may have been in your report, and if so, I apologize for parroting back to you, but SBA needs to not be so reactionary. As long as they continue to be reactionary and trying to do that, I think they're always going to be a little bit behind the curve on that. And in the disaster area, that has such dire consequences. Because again, that means that the people aren't, the people who've just been devastated, their business or their homes, are not going to get the type of service that Congress and certainly SBA wants them to get.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you. Gentlelady yields back. I would just like to note, you know, as chair of this committee and having worked with the gentlelady from New York, just to acknowledge how determined, how fiercely she has fought for her constituents in the matter of the devastation that was wreaked upon them by Hurricane Sandy. And there were challenges, many of them. Some of it was bureaucratic challenges. The SBA and others made it very difficult for people to rebuild. And she fought time and time again, consistently, never gave up, and hasn't given up to this day. So I want to publicly recognize that. And they say we're never bipartisan
Yeah,
in
right.
Congress, right? But
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With your help, and it was a bipartisan effort. And what we have to make sure is that the agency is ready,
Right.
because there's going to be another one.
Right.
And we just can't go back to them and say, I understand your pain, but we're not ready to
Yeah.
provide the assistance that you need in a timely basis. Many of these businesses have to shut down
Right.
their doors
Right.
if they don't get the assistance that they need in the next 4 weeks after a disaster strike, and that is
Yeah.
unacceptable.
absolutely. And we want to thank the Inspector General for appearing before this committee today, and we also want to thank her for all the work that her office does and continues to do, highlighting the management and performance challenges within the SBA, the Small Business Administration. And moving forward, this committee will remain committed to working together with the SBA to ensure that these challenges are addressed and that the agency is able to provide effective and efficient assistance to America's small business. And that's what this committee is all about, working in a bipartisan manner to improve the lot of small businesses in this country. And all members will have 5 legislative days to submit questions or to supplement their remarks. And if there's no further business to come before this committee, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.